Welcome to Spirit Outspoken, where we dive deep into the realms of spirituality, healing, and the beautiful chaos we call life. From ancient traditions to modern practices, we are going to explore it all. Whether you're a newbie or a seasoned seeker, you're guaranteed to find something that inspires, challenges, and intrigues you here.
So grab your favorite beverage, find a cozy spot to curl up, and join us for Spirit Outspoken. Hello, and welcome back to Spirit Outspoken. Today, we are diving into part 2 as we talk about Lynn McTaggart's experiments in regards to the power of intention.
Yes.
Jason and I, if you listened last week, we watched this incredible documentary on Gaia, and it talks all about how our minds and the intention that we send out, especially in group settings,
Yes.
has the power to change nature, water, people, life, basically.
Yes.
And so we're going to go a little bit deeper this week. You know, last week we talked more about the power of intention as it related to leaves and water and seeds. This week, we're going to talk about people. And this is where it really starts to get cool.
Yes. And what I thought was so funny was like, Lynn had she is such a trailblazer.
Yeah.
Like, this woman is so passionate and so brilliant and somebody that's so well respected in her field and also really well respected by scientists. But Gary, as we were joking around, yeah, Dr. Schwartz, her partner in crime, and really the individual that helped her set up the controls and helped her do some of the experiments that we talked about in the last episode, she really wanted to start with like really, really big things around people. And he was like, hold up, why don't we start with just setting the controls, setting the baseline for the potential of intention and then build from there.
Right.
So that's exactly what they did.
Yep.
So one of the reasons why Lynn wanted to jump into people was because she was really inspired by the Maharishi Effect. And that's where a small percentage of a population tries to impact the quality of life for the greater population.
Yeah.
Right. And they do this by practicing transcendental meditation as a group.
Mm-hmm.
And they follow some of its advanced programs, right? So from my understanding, TM, as it's called, transcendental meditation, is more advanced, right? It's like people and meditators that have been doing this for a while. So there's specific parameters that I'm not totally familiar with, right? But I don't know if you're talking about like changing societal quality of life, like I guess it would be a little bit more intense, right? But in a particular situation, and a lot of the studies that they've replicated, is usually focused on the reduction of crime and violence. Okay. So they've repeated the Maharishi Effect a few different times, but there's one in particular that's worth noting. In 1993 in Washington, D.C., have you heard of this one?
Yes, and I think it's so cool.
It's so cool. Okay. So I wasn't super familiar with it. I stumbled upon it, I don't know, maybe a couple weeks ago. So it's a notable experiment where it involved assembling a large group of TM practitioners in Washington, D.C., and it was during the summer of 1993. So after this large group, I don't know how many people were in the group. It was a large group of TM practitioners in Washington, D.C. After they did this, the study reported a decrease in violent crimes by 23.3%.
Crazy.
Okay, so guess what the probability was that this was due to chance?
What?
2 in 1 billion.
Yeah.
Because they looked at all of the different variables, right?
Right, because you have to. I mean, there's a lot of things,
Yes.
in a city.
In a city, right? Yeah. So they basically said that like this had to have had an impact. So this was the genesis of the Maharishi Effect. And like I said, it's been repeated in a few different instances. But it goes back to intention and the power of group thought. And like even going back to how Jesus had instructed us, like if 2 or more people agree and ask, right? Like you have to state your intention. Like we would like to reduce the violent crime in Washington, D.C. You're setting an intention and then, you know, you're going through the practice of visualizing it and seeing it come true and all of the different things that come through TM. And they said, you know what? This can't be by chance.
Right.
This had to have had an impact. So it's really powerful stuff.
Yeah.
So Lynn was inspired by this.
Yeah.
And she blew my socks off.
Yeah. She decided to take it and run with it, folks.
Oh, man.
They took on no small task, though, for their first, which kind of surprised me, I guess, because
I
she's like, let's see if we can influence a war.
No, she's crazy.
So-
She like literally, she's like, you know what? Deep end, I raise you 20 feet. We're just going to go.
So they started the Sri Lanka peace experiment. Now, for those of you who don't know, there had been war going on for decades, 3 decades in this part of the world. So she partnered with the Foundation for Coexistence, and she chose to work with them because they'd been keeping detailed records of deaths and injuries for years in Sri Lanka. And their reports were done in real time. So they would come out every week with the new tallies of these things.
So they had a good baseline to start from, and they had data from before.
And then why that's important also is because they were able to use that data, and then through using a statistical method called time series, they were able to then predict, based off of past experiences, what the projected or predicted amount of deaths and injuries would be based on the historical data. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
Okay. So anyway, the way that they did this is they had 15,000 people around the world that participated in this. And they were instructed to do a 10-minute intention every day for 8 days. And it culminated with a candle lighting ceremony in Sri Lanka that was organized by this foundation that they were working with. And what was startling to them at first, right, is they started analyzing the data. And violence actually erupted during the week of their intention. It quadrupled. And so at first they were a little worried, like, what is going on?
They were like, did we do this?
Did we somehow do this? But then what happened is it plummeted down by 75% the week after. And shortly after that, a 3 decades long war ended. And the reason that it ended is because the government had won some really key significant battles. So hence the eruption, right, of the violence.
Right.
And because of that, they were able to turn around the course of events and actually
find peace
to a peaceful ending of this. And, so they were excited about this, but right, like they said, there's so many variables in a war-torn situation. Like, yes, it's really cool. The timing certainly seems to sync with what we were doing, but there's still a lot of variables out there that we can't really account for.
Yes.
So then she moved on and decided to do the experiment that I think is the coolest out of all of them.
Yes, and she was partnering with a statistician from
Irvine.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So like, and this woman, she is really fascinating to watch her. She's like, she's just literally looking at the data, but she was kind of saying like, okay, this is fascinating. Like they went through that, the war example. But I think that they like learned a lot and they wanted to narrow the scope.
Yes.
Right.
Let's hone in and let's see if we can replicate this with a smaller, more controlled group or area.
Yes.
So what they did is they decided to focus on the most violent city in the United States at the time. This was done in 2017, and it was St. Louis, Missouri, and particularly one specific area of St. Louis, which was called the Fairground community. And this had been an area that was, devastated by violence, and the violence was growing year over year.
Yep.
And so what they did again, and for this one, they actually partnered with Gaia. And so an intention was done by a group for 6 days. And then they waited for 6 months and waited to see. And again, the historical information was used to
create a model,
and predict what the violence should be. And what they found, you guys, was that after the intention, violent crime in this area went down by 43%. But the kicker is that the violence only went down in this fairground neighborhood, not in the surrounding areas. So the violence only decreased in the exact neighborhood and portion of St. Louis where they were sending the intention. Every place else continued to grow as normal. 43%.
It's insane.
It's crazy.
It's
I think this one is so cool.
I think it's really cool too.
Yeah.
And like, oh my God, like the potential of this blows my mind.
Think of the power we hold. And that's what, so often we feel like, things happening in our world with wars and with politics and with all this stuff is out of our control, when the reality is if we could just figure out a way to come together and set some intentions think of the power that's in that.
Yes. And you can start small.
Yes.
You can start small even with a group of 8.
Yes. And now you need to lead into this because this gets really cool too.
Yeah, I will. Okay, so the power of 8. Lynn actually wrote a book called The Power of 8. It's in my Amazon shopping
Did you
cart.
order it?
Yeah, it's in my shopping cart, and so is the Field.
Okay.
Because like the Field, I guess she wrote sort of explaining a lot of the, I don't know, like the place in which people are tapping into.
Got
So
it.
I'm always really interested in like, well, how?
Yeah.
You know, it's like I believe it.
But how
I'm
does it
seeing
work?
the studies, I'm seeing the outcomes, but how?
Mhm.
So I believe the Field kind of goes into that.
Okay.
But the Power of 8 was all about these different workshops that she would do. I guess I call them offsites or conferences. She would get, hundreds of people together, but then she would group different people up into groups of 8. And she would ask them, like, is there anybody in the group that has a health condition or something that they're looking to heal? And they identified that individual. And then she would say, okay, you are going to now send an intention to that individual of healing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what that would look like is 10 minutes intention sitting in a circle holding hands. So they'd sit together in a circle, hold hands, direct their energy, direct their intentions towards this particular individual and hold it for 10 minutes. So then the groups would leave and they would go off, they would go to their hotel room or go home or whatever. And then they would come back and then they would be asked one by one if anything had changed. So this is where it gets crazy. So there was a woman in her 70s who had severe scoliosis since childhood. Mm-hmm. She was experiencing severe pain, right? She's like, I never wake up without pain. I've got chronic pain, totally affecting her quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
And she woke up that next morning and had no pain. And it hadn't returned months later.
Yeah. They followed up with her and she was still feeling great.
Yes. And she described the experience during the intention circle. I guess we'll call it the intention circle, the Power of 8. And she was like, it felt like I put my finger into the outlet. I felt an electrical current come through my hands.
Yeah.
Isn't that unbelievable?
I love that.
Yes. Then there was a woman who was 64 years old that had severe retinal damage. She went to doctor after doctor after doctor, and they said, there's nothing we can do for you. You're eventually going to go blind. So she was losing her eyesight over the course of 9 to 10 years. So this is like a significant period of her time that she's trying. She's trying, going from doctor to doctor, and she's coming up empty. So she goes to this Power of 8 workshop. And during the intention circle, where the other 7 individuals are sending her healing energy, she said she started to feel bubbles like in her eyes, like a physical sensation in her eyes in that exact moment. And she said, I knew in that moment I was healed. She just knew it.
Yeah.
So she went home and there's video of her in the documentary where she can see everything in her house. And she's just in tears, pictures on the wall that she couldn't see.
Sweetest video.
And her daughter is documenting all of this. They followed up with her. Guess what her eyesight is now? 20/20.
Yeah. And her
20/20.
her retina's completely healed.
Completely healed.
Yeah.
Completely healed. I got another one for you.
All right.
Ready? So this other woman, she was so sweet. She had the most beautiful energy. Like you could tell she experienced a miracle.
Yeah.
Okay. So she was suffering from sclerosis of the liver, which is basically like liver failure.
Mm-hmm.
She had an enlarged spleen. She was also told there is nothing that we can do. And the only way that you can survive is if you get a liver transplant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So she did the intention circle. She goes to the Power of 8. She experiences it. And then she said like she didn't really experience anything in that moment.
Yeah.
So she was like, I don't know. I don't really know, but I'm just going to go with it. So she goes home. And that night she saw a bright, vibrant vision of green light. And you and I both know that green light is an indication of health.
Yeah.
So she has this vision of bright green light that evening. And then she feels this really cold sensation in her torso. And then a green cold stream shooting up her leg. So she has all of these like
vivid
really visual scenarios. So she has that, but like has really no indication if she's healed. It wasn't like the pain. It wasn't like the vision.
Yeah.
Right. So she doesn't really know. So she goes back to her doctor for scans. And we get to experience her reading the letter
I love
from her doctor.
Yes, it's the actual letter she received after they reviewed her scans.
So she goes through all of her scans. Yep, gets this letter. And the letter says that she's got a clean bill of health. Her liver is normal. Her spleen is normal. Like all of the things that were, dire, need a transplant. There's nothing that we can do. She is still healthy today. Still healthy today. And she says, she's like, I experienced a miracle.
Yeah.
But one thing that I thought was really fascinating, right, is that a lot of the people that participated in these group meditations, like all of the different studies that we've talked about, like the war, St. Louis, that neighborhood, and even in these intention setting healing circles, the people that were the senders, the ones doing the intentions, they also reported spontaneous healing, troubles in their life that they were going through just miraculously resolved themselves. I'm getting along better with my son who is having extreme issues. Like the pain point, it wasn't always physical, but like
relationships improved, mood
outcomes,
improved, health improved. Yes. Yeah.
And what does that remind you of? Meta.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Loving kindness.
Loving kindness. Like the act of sending somebody else love and kindness improves our own health, immunity, our own well-being, right?
Yeah. And the importance of love again, right?
It's all
like we talked about,
baby.
Well, you can share from everything going that you and Charlie went.
I can. And we're going to talk about precognition in the next episode, but only 3 months before my second oldest son was diagnosed with leukemia, I started becoming absolutely fascinated with topics of healing. I was reading white papers and, scientific journals on the power of prayer, double-blind studies that they're doing. I just was down this rabbit hole, which isn't very much unlike me, but I thought the topic was really interesting. And I know that my soul was sort of prepping me, and my intuition was prepping me for what my son was going to need. I basically was reading a blueprint of what to do if a loved one gets a life-threatening diagnosis without me really realizing it. So fast forward, my second oldest son gets diagnosed April 2023, and we just kicked into gear, right? And very quickly, we knew exactly how we were going to approach this diagnosis. So first and foremost, I have yet to this day Googled a single thing about his diagnosis. Haven't done it once. Like my friends don't believe me. And I'm like, why? Why would I focus on his diagnosis when he's going to health? Like that does nothing. That's fear-based. That's in my mind where we are today, not where we're going. So that was a very important mindset, I felt like. And the things that we did were we almost crowdsourced group belief and prayer, right? And I was not aware of all of these different studies and impacts of group intention and group prayer. But I did believe in the power of visualization and the power of prayer and the positive outcomes that can come from that.
Yeah.
So that's what I went with. And, people would say what can you do? And I was very deliberate and I was very repetitive. And so was Charlie. I would say, picture Roman playing. I'm going to get emotional.
Oh.
I would say picture Roman playing soccer in the backyard with his brothers, and picture him graduating high school, and picture him dancing at his wedding. And I just kept saying that. And people were like, I'm on it, And I mean, you were very much one of those people doing meditations and visualizations and prayers. And I would send you very specific things. I would say, okay, we're going into surgery. This is what we're believing for. And
which was so helpful too, as someone trying to support you.
Yes.
It
and
was
now I'm damn, 2 people agree.
Yeah.
All right. Well, amazing. Now I get it. And, we were very consistent. We were visualizing his health. We were visualizing, the cancer just disappearing from his body. We had really scary things happen in the hospital, right? What happens when the physical world is not matching what you're believing for.
Yeah.
Right? Like, what happens? Well, like for us, we kept going, but like I understand the fear. Like, oh my gosh, like he's getting worse. Like this is
Right.
we're not trending in the right direction. So we had a couple, very, very scary days. But something really crazy happened. So, basically everything that the doctors said in the beginning, like didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So the very first thing that happened was they did a spinal tap. It was like one of his first procedures. And they said, well, based on the amount of cancer in his body that we see, it's coming up on the x-ray and the CAT scans, it's very likely he's going to need radiation in his spine. Okay, like, all right, we'll deal with that. We'll deal with it when we have to deal with it. Come out of the procedure room, his spinal fluid's clear. Unbelievable, right? So we're like, all right, that's great news. He had a severe reaction to his first dose of chemo, totally overwhelmed his body. It basically worked too well. And he had something called tumor lysis, and tumor lysis can be deadly.
Yeah.
And it was it was the scariest 12, 18 hours of our life where, a lot of crazy stuff went down. He ended up in the ICU after an emergency surgery, went on dialysis. And they told us like he's going to be in the ICU for 2 weeks. Buckle up. You're going to be here for a while. And they also said that they expected him to be on dialysis probably 2 cycles of 3 days. So a total of 6 days. But they do dialysis for 3 days, take him off, put him back on. And this child, spent 1 night in the ICU.
It's crazy.
1 night in the ICU, not 2 weeks, 1 night.
Yeah.
They took him off dialysis. I think it was 24 hours after they put him on it, and did not need to put him on it a second time. We had doctors coming by and saying, I heard about this kid. I got to see him with my own two eyes.
My own eyes.
And they're looking at the x-rays of the progress of his tumor shrinking. And they said, it's unbelievable. And you could literally see the cancer leaving his body. It was like sludgy slush coming out of the dialysis machine, right? Just clearing out of his body. And I found out a couple days later. So they like kicked us out of the ICU, and one of his main oncologists came in on his care team. And she said, Roman's remarkable. He's remarkable. And she's going through all this data. And at this point, I have no clue, like ANC, all these different terms. And she said, he no longer has cancer in his body. And I said, since when? And she said, April 20th. And that was 3 days after he was diagnosed. 3 days. Like they're seeing it on his labs. And what's remarkable was that was the day he woke up in the ICU, and it was like his life force was back. Like I have a picture of it with him eating his cake pop. He woke up and he said, I want grapes and Rice Krispies. And we heard him speak, and Charlie and I like literally jumped out of our respective sleeping areas.
Yeah.
And we're just staring at him, and we are looking at him, and when I say like, the difference between what he looked like there versus one of the scariest times of our life, it was remarkable. But I believe that day was when my son was healed. Like cancer was gone. And I believe it was because of the hundreds of people that were aligned and believing for his perfect health and outcomes. And, when people asked us what they could do, it was like, I went back to what I learned, and I said like, and like this is all rooted so deeply in my Christian faith around healing. Like, ask and you shall receive, right? Put the intention out there and you will get it. Your faith has made you whole. Like, it's your belief, it's your faith. And listen, like, I know that this is complicated. We've no parents that have lost children in our community because of this. Like, I know that there are situations where we don't always know, and we don't always know why, God calls us home. Right. But in this situation, if you ask me or my husband, I know why it's like to see the shock on people's faces over and over and over throughout his journey. I mean, I have like no less than 20 stories of people being like, okay, well, he's going to need leg braces. And we're like, oh, geez, leg braces, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's a severe side effect of his chemo that he was getting. And you go around clinic, you see all of these little kids with leg braces and, and we're like, all right, we got to wrap our head around that now. Not only did he never need leg braces, like in the point of his treatment where his legs were supposed to be horrible and the worst, they were the best.
Yeah.
Like his physical therapy. And like, we talked about this before, like I'm doing this stuff, right? Because I believe it. It doesn't really sink in until you see the repetitive shock on people's faces. It's like, we have no baseline. Like we don't know what to expect. And they also told us because of the amount of cancer in his body that he would have to have an extra phase of chemo. Mm-hmm. And he was fully in remission. They could not detect a single cancer cell in his bone marrow 28 days after he was diagnosed, where cancer absolutely filled his body. And that's what you hope for. That's what you pray for. But even if they found it, they would do another biopsy like another 3 months later. Mm-hmm. And that's when they want to see remission.
Yeah.
That's when they want to see remission. And that's when outcomes are still amazing.
Yeah.
So the fact that like they just thought time and time and time again. So, and our situation has not been short of challenges. It has not been rainbows and bunnies.
No.
I mean, there has been things along the way that have been very scary, a relapse scare, like all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess like we just keep leaning on what we know, which is like we believe in the power of belief and group prayer and group thought. And I don't know.
It's amazing.
It's changed my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
Yes. Yes.
Watching you go through that was so powerful.
Yeah.
And incredible to be a part of.
Yes. Yes. And you're like, I mean, I talk about like prayer warriors. People that are like, all right, we're doing this, and not praying from a place of fear, but praying from a place of belief.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important too. Like you got to know your people that align. Mm-hmm. Now that we know, like we could put words to this like unknown, unseen things, but align to your frequency, align with your belief. That amplifies it. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah.
Incredible, Jace.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really proud of my son and his journey. Yeah. Yeah.
And you should be proud as a mom.
Yeah, I am. And I'm really proud of my husband. And it's changed us in like the deepest way possible. Like I remember in the beginning, I was sobbing on the phone to my mom and I said, I just want my life back. And I had this like very distinct moment. We actually have a photo of it. We took a photo of our two sons in the doctor's office while we were waiting for them to read my son's x-ray to figure out what was going on. And they were playing and they were being really cute. And I realized like that was the last moment before everything changed and before our life fell apart, right? Like in front of our eyes. But I can stand here today and say, I don't want to go back to that place anymore.
Yeah.
Despite everything that we've been through, of course, like if I could take this all away from my son, I would. God has a really incredible way of transforming you if you let him, and showing you miracles if you believe. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now that we're both sobbing. Yeah, but totally. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's exciting to share, and I hope this platform is an opportunity for people when they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
To feel like they can do something.
Yeah.
And
just have spiritual tools in your toolkit, right?
Yes, that's right.
Ways to align and yeah.
So I found out something cool about Miss Lynn.
You did.
By the way.
After all that, where are we going?
Sorry, I'm a total Gemini where I'm like, okay, we're done crying now. We're done crying. We're on to other things. She has a global intention experiment on 2/1. Yep.
Like in a couple days?
Yep, like in a couple days. So I think this episode is probably going to air after that.
After, yeah.
But we'll post it on our Instagram because I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah.
And you and I got to do this.
We
got to do this. So I don't know what they're going to be.
What the intention
intending,
is. Yeah.
but I want to be part of this.
Oh my gosh.
And you and I have been brainstorming. Like, what
Yeah.
if 8 of us got together in the Chapel of Children's Minnesota and, did a 20-minute intention and then even 10 minutes and then do 10 minutes at home for a week.
Yeah.
Just focusing on that area, focusing on that hospital, focusing on the doctors and the children and
Yeah.
the parents. Whew,
I know. I love it.
what could happen?
We should do a Spirit Outspoken one. We're going to brainstorm it
Oh, we're doing one.
for the members of our community.
We're doing one for sure.
We'll noodle on that and figure something out. I love that idea.
Okay, in the next episode, we're going to be talking about precognition. So I'll give you guys something to think about. What if your intuition isn't just a hunch, but a glimpse into the future? Now, on our next episode, we're going to be diving deep into the extraordinary topic of precognition. Is it science, spirituality, something else entirely? Guess what? There's experiments on this too.
Oh, yeah.
Tune in and find out what we've learned about precognition.
Thanks so much for listening, you guys. We hope that you were able to find some very useful information and hopefully just feel inspired of your amazing potential to influence yourself and the world around you. So make sure to follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We're now on YouTube.
Woo! With video, you guys are very fish.
And also make sure to find us on Instagram and TikTok. So you're sure to stay up to date on daily inspiration and all the latest and greatest that we have to offer. Take care.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. If you're ready to take your spirituality to the next level, be sure to check out our website, spiritoutspoken.com. There you can download free educational resources, read our latest blog posts, and join the Spirit Outspoken community.
And don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Spirit Outspoken to stay up to date on news, happenings, shenanigans, and all things Spirit Outspoken.